Okay, let's dive in. Today, we're looking closely at some source material, really digging into its perspective on the costs of federal regulation.
Right. Particularly the economic costs.
Mm,
And it also singles out some specific environmental rules.
yeah, exactly. The source makes some pretty strong arguments, doesn't it, about regulation's impact, and it critiques, past government actions on environmental stuff.
Yeah.
So, our mission really is just to unpack the key claims, the main details that this source presents, specifically for you listening.
And well, right off the bat, the source hits you with a big number. It claims the federal regulatory system carries this massive annual cost.
How massive.
$1.8 trillion. That's the
Uh,
figure the source uses.
$1.8 trillion. Wow,
Yeah,
okay, that's quite a claim. And the source connects that number directly to the economy's performance.
it does.
Oh,
Absolutely. According to the source, that cost is a major reason for what it calls lackluster economic growth.
lackluster how? Does it give specifics?
Yeah, it points to like an 8-year stretch where the U.S. economy apparently didn't hit over 3% growth in any year.
Okay.
And the source suggests this regulatory weight is a big part of that story. It basically argues many rules cost a lot, but, don't always deliver on their promises.
Right. So, a general argument about cost and effectiveness. Does the source give us a concrete example to sort of illustrate this point?
It does. And it picks a really significant one, the lead and copper rule.
Ah, okay. That's about drinking water safety, obviously crucial. So, what's the source's angle on that?
Well, this is where the source gets quite specific. It frames it almost as a case study of past failure.
Failure how?
It argues a major failing was the previous administration not finalizing that lead and copper rule over its whole 8 years in office.
Okay, so the blame, according to the source, is put squarely on that previous administration and the EPA from that time.
Exactly. The source emphasizes the delay. It mentions the rule was expected by 2018, apparently,
Mm.
and even brings up testimony from a professor about how vital it was for clean water.
So, for this source, the issue isn't necessarily the regulation itself, but the fact it just didn't get finished.
Precisely. The inaction is the focus of the criticism here, not some change in policy introduced later.
And how does the source relate this to, say, the crisis in Flint, Michigan? That seems relevant.
It brings up Flint, yeah.
Yeah.
He states that the existing rules there were either, not good enough or weren't followed properly.
Right.
But, and this is crucial to the source's argument, it blames the failure to finalize the new lead and copper rule, the delay, squarely on the previous administration.
Okay.
It explicitly says, according to the source, that this delay is the issue, not any regulatory review processes that the source itself might be discussing. It draws a very
Yeah.
clear line.
That distinction is important for understanding the source's narrative. So, given this view on costs and these alleged delays, how does the source suggest dealing with the regulatory system overall? Is there a proposed fix?
Yeah, it outlines a process. It involves setting up a commission.
A commission to do what?
Its job, as described in the source, would be to look at existing regulations, figure out if they're unnecessary or maybe ineffective, and then recommend repeal
Recommend to whom?
to Congress. Congress would then have to vote on the recommendation.
Ah, so it's not just this commission deciding on its own. The source presents it as having checks and balances.
That's how the source frames it, yes. With congressional approval needed, the idea, from this perspective, is to review rules that might be holding things back, maybe older ones from the 70s or 80s that don't fit today.
And does the source address potential worries? Like, could this review process end up weakening important protections, like for the environment?
It tackles that head on. The source dismisses those concerns as scare tactics.
Okay.
It asserts a proposed review isn't meant to hurt whistleblowers or water quality.
Oh,
And circling back to its main example, the source insists this review idea has absolutely nothing to do with past problems like Flint.
right. Reinforcing that point about blaming the past administration for Flint-related rule delays.
Exactly. It keeps that separation very clear.
It definitely seems like the lead and copper rule is central to the source's argument. Does it end with any kind of call to action on that specific rule?
It does, yeah. The source includes a direct plea for the administration in power. At the time the source was written, the Trump administration, to basically hurry up and finalize the lead and copper rule.
To get it done quickly.
Yes, so that local water systems, towns, cities can actually implement it and, improve water safety. That's the stated goal in the source.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into this specific source material, we've seen it lay out this core tension, right? On one hand, a huge economic cost blamed on regulation linked to slower growth.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, it acknowledges the importance of certain rules, using that lead and copper rule as a prime example, but focusing blame for its delay entirely on a past administration. That specific blame seems like a key takeaway from this source's perspective.
Definitely. And it leaves us and you with a question to think about based purely on this source's viewpoint. If you accept its argument about significant economic costs from regulation overall,
Right.
but you also see its point about the critical need for rules like the lead and copper one and the real-world impact when they're delayed, how do you balance those things? What does the timing, the practical reality of getting rules like that implemented actually mean for communities on the ground?